Moonstone Island is one of those games that takes a number of different elements from a variety of genres and meshes them together to make one game. In here you'll find farm life simulation, monster collecting, card battling, as well as foraging and crafting as you live the life of an alchemist on the aforementioned island. But can it bring it all together into one special concoction, or will this particular potion blow up in their face? Well, thank you to the publishers for the review code, and now let's find out. So starting with the story then, you begin life by moving out of mum and dad's house, moving islands in fact, to begin your scholarship as an alchemist. You get on your broom and off you go, but whilst flying to a new island, your broom is destroyed and you crash land, setting up home on this particular island being Moonstone Island, but there are 100 other islands in the vicinity for you to explore as the game goes on. You'll meet the residents of this new town, becoming friends or more as you go on through the game, and you'll fulfill a number of side quests for these characters, as well as there being a main quest to continue with as you continue to pursue a life as an alchemist. So on to the gameplay then, and as I mentioned, there are a number of different genres and elements at play here. Let's start with the farm life element, and as I mentioned, you'll set up a home on this new island, and there is a town nearby with a number of residents, shops where you can buy seeds, new equipment, upgrade your home as you go through the game of course, and you can plant these seeds to grow a number of different flowers or plants that you'll use later in your experiments. As well as this, the monsters you'll catch, and we'll come on to all that in a minute, almost serve as the animals in the game, as you can build a barn, keeping the animals that you don't want to take into battle with you here, and by looking after these animals well enough, they'll start to drop items for you that you can again use in your alchemy experiments. A lot of the other recipe items that you need will be found whilst foraging, and crafting is a major part of the game. Before you can even begin to think about having a barn, for example, you'll need to build it, but before you can even do this, you'll need to build a magic bench. As well as that, you need to build a forge for you to turn the ore that you find in mines into ingots, and again this can be used to build a variety of different objects. And a while into the game you'll build your alchemist table where you can start to conduct those experiments. The concoctions that you make here can be sold, as well as pretty much anything else that you forage or craft, by putting these bits into a box in a very similar vein to most farm life games, or you can take them with you to use in battle to give you stat perks. Let's move on to the battling now, and I did mention there are a number of different islands surrounding Moonstone Island. Basically you can travel to these initially by balloon, but you can fix your broom or create other forms of transport as you go on, and these other islands are procedurally generated. There will be 100 of them in total, and on these islands are a number of different creatures that you can battle and attempt to tame, thus collecting them in the process. The battling itself is done via cards. Each of your creatures has its own set of cards, and each time they level up through battling, not only will their stats improve, but you can also add another card to their deck, and the creatures will fall under a different category such as earth, water, poison, dark, etc., meaning that the cards they use will be pertinent to that particular class. You'll only have earth creatures to begin with until you start to make your way onto these other islands and find more exotic creatures, but when this does start to happen, it does really start to open the game up and certainly adds a level of strategy as you begin to pick creatures whose cards will give you a decent amount of variety within battle. Before you can deal damage to an opponent, you do need to knock their armor down, and again certain cards will do this, and as you become more powerful, the cards you have will do even more damage or knock down this armor quicker. There are 30 dungeons spread across these islands, and defeating the enemies within the dungeon will see the game open up and see you move on further through the story. There's a lot more I could mention, there is quite a lot of it. I mean, obviously there are so many genres here merged together, you would expect there to be quite a few intricacies into how it all works. Whilst not going into too fine a detail, what I will say is that I applaud the game for how it has tried to intrinsically link all of these genres together. Without foraging for items, you won't be able to craft a barn. Without crafting the barn, you won't be able to house extra creatures. Without housing these creatures, they won't drop the items you need to make concoctions, bringing in the alchemy. It does work very well, and it's nice to see it trying to balance out all of these different genres and make them all as relevant as each other. It doesn't necessarily 100% succeed in this, and personally I do like it when games allow you to leave one area and focus on something else for a while. Rune Factory is very good at doing this, allowing you to go into dungeons if you wish, or allowing you to play it as a straight farm life until you're ready for such actions. Here you have to be ready for all of these genres at once and willing to accept just how intrinsic each of them are, otherwise I don't think you'll get the most out of the game. I also feel that because they've used all of the elements of these different genres, sometimes they are at odds with each other. For example, any creatures that you can't have in your team or house in a barn get moved to the Science Research Centre. Now the problem with this is that sometimes the Research Centre is closed, as you find in farm life games, with shops being closed on certain days, meaning that on that day you wouldn't be able to go and get the creatures that you want from storage. It's just these times where I do wish they'd have streamlined some of the elements that perhaps work well for one genre when it's being played as a straight one genre game, but won't merge as well when thrown in with so many other different ones. I also feel that the game takes a while to get going. It was a good 5 hours in before I was able to catch creatures of a certain level. This is all done via a skill tree, by the way, allowing me to start to mix my team up past the standard earth creatures that you find right at the beginning. It is a slow burner and there's a lot to take in, but it does definitely start to reward you once you've sunk that early time into it. Gameplay gets 16 out of 20. Controls for the most part are fine. You'd use your shoulder buttons to cycle through items, pressing X brings up your menus, and you can cycle through your tools by holding down ZL and then using the sticks. This part is a little fiddly, I must say, but for the most part they're okay. They get 15 out of 20. Now moving on to the visuals and audio, starting with the visuals of course. The first positive I will give is that Moonstone Island is an incredibly vibrant game. The colours pop on the screen, it makes lovely use of its pixel art style, and it definitely gives off a very warm and wholesome vibe. The islands that you fly to will look slightly different depending on which type of creatures live here. If they're electric type, for example, the trees look like they have bolts of lightning in them. Water types live on very tropical looking islands, and poison types live on islands full of smoke and smog. The creatures themselves are a good eclectic bunch. I felt it started in quite a mundane fashion, I must say. I don't know if restricting you to one particular class for at least the first couple of hours until you started to explore and build your level up was the best path to take, but once you do start to experience those different types, it definitely does really start to show its hand in this respect with some very creative designs. In terms of performance now, there was a patch that released a good 7 or 8 hours into my playthrough. Before this I had been experiencing some stutter on some of the islands that were populated with a lot of forestation. The patch did seem to fix this to a certain degree, although I did still notice a few minor stutters after this. This is of course all pre-launch. By the time you're playing it, you should see that patch version, which was definitely much better, and hopefully they'll patch it again soon just to iron out the final few wrinkles. In terms of the audio, now this is quite a mixed bag. Now in terms of the quality of the music, it's very high. There are some beautiful tunes here, one in particular really lovely, very strong in terms of its composition, but very mellow in terms of how it made you feel. The reason I say it's a mixed bag is because the music tends to stop playing after about an hour of in-game time. Then you'll have a good couple of hours, again in-game I'm talking, of silence, barring ambient sound, before the music will then start back up again with either the same tune or a different one. It's just a very odd way to do it. Now I appreciate the music's on a loop, but having such a long period of silence in terms of background music, not including ambience as I said, really was quite off-putting. I don't think this approach works, and I would have preferred for the music to have continued playing without these lengthy pauses. Visuals certainly bring the world to life, and I did really enjoy the use of colour, and of course this changes the aesthetic as you go through the seasons. It gets 16 out of 20. Audio in terms of the quality is very good, but I don't personally like the choice of having such long stretches of silence, and it also gets 16 out of 20. Moonstone Island costs £17.99 and regional equivalents are on your screen now. For this price you are getting a pretty lengthy adventure, to be fair, at least a good 30 hours, and then of course if you want to collect all of the creatures, this will further extend that runtime, and if you're happy just to play it through as a farm life game, then again you can play it for even longer still. Whilst I think this is good value and I do think it's a very well crafted game, bar a couple of little hiccups as I've mentioned, the one thing I will say, and I did mention it briefly earlier on, is I do feel you need to really want a game that is heavy on foraging, heavy on crafting, heavy on alchemy, heavy on monster collecting. You have to enjoy card battling. There are quite a few caveats as to what exactly you have to want to do in a game for you to get the most out of it. For me personally, there are parts that I didn't want to do as much as the game was almost forcing me to do for me to move on. Things such as crafting are not really for me in games, and given the choice here I would have done far less of it, but I didn't really feel that I did have that choice. Just bear it in mind. It's obviously a very personal thing, but I do feel the value is high and value gets 17 out of 20. To conclude, Moonstone Island is a game that does take a fair few genres, throws them in a pot and stirs it up to see what happens. What does happen, to be fair, is it produces a pretty good game. There are times when these styles don't mesh together particularly well, they seem at odds with each other on occasion, but for the most part they do complement each other and produce something that's well worth playing. There are a couple of hiccups here and there, and because it encompasses so many genres, you have to enjoy these genres quite a lot to get the most out of it, I would say. But what it doesn't do, and I'm pleased to say, is become a jack of all trades and master of none. A very charming game this, and one that I would definitely recommend. Moonstone Island gets a SwitchUp score of 80%. Thank you everybody for watching this review, I hope you enjoyed it. Please do remember to leave a like if you did. Don't forget, if you are looking for eShop credit to pick this game up, or any other game for that matter, you can use our website switchup.gg, get your eShop credit over there and you'll get yourself 5% of your purchase price back as cashback to use against a future purchase, and there are other links down there to places such as PlayAsia with discount codes, so you can save yourselves a bit of money, and it does help the channel out, so thank you to anyone that does do this. A quick thank you to our patrons and our channel members for your continued support, and to each and every one of you for watching our videos. Take care, and until next time, happy gaming.